Okay, so let's take a look at the next task, and we see that we've switched from the primary naming convention of Mobile Connect to Mobile Voice Access. So what we're getting into now really begins to dive into the functions of Mobile Voice Access, although some of the things that Mobile Voice Access, or the main thing that it entails, which is a VXML script running on an H323 gateway, does not have to be accomplished, nor does it even have to actually be turned on to in a service parameter system-wide to support this next function. We can support this with regular Mobile Connect, even though it does sort of fall under the moniker of Mobile Voice Access. Okay, so we're looking at inbound call recognition and display, and we're given the instruction to ensure that whenever Hurley or Sawyer call in from their mobile phones to other phones' DIDs that are registered with the CUCM server, oops, sorry for the scroll, that their calling number and name show up to the called party as their desk phone's extension along with their proper calling name display. So we want them to be able to dial in, and we want to, on the desk phone, we want the third-party user that's seeing the phone to see, you know, if someone's called, let's say Sawyer's calling in from his mobile line, and we'll just take a look at how it looks currently. Let's say he's dialing into, he would dial internationally, so 001 512 602 2001, calling into branch 1, phone 1. And currently it shows up, the number was globalized as any other PSTN number was, and then localized. So it shows the localization for this phone shows 011, and then the country code, and geographic code, or a 6 indicating mobile, and then the rest of the subscriber digits. We wish it to actually show from James Ford at extension 3002. We want it to show exactly, we want it to show on phone 2001 and all other phones in exactly the same way as if James had called directly over to Eloise' desk. Okay, so once this display updates here, there. This is how it looks when James or Sawyer's desk phone calls over to 2001. We want it to look in the exact same way when his mobile calls in. Likewise, when when Hurley calls over to, let's say, James at 3002. Update. Go. It shows from Hugo Reyes at parenthesis 1002, the extension or DN of 1002. We want it so that when Hurley's mobile calls in, so 011 31 20 703 3002, currently, when called in from the PSTN from Hurley's mobile, calls in and looks actually localized the way that we've set up calling party transformations to be localized for any PSTN numbers from the US or from any other country. We want it to show up as Hugo Reyes 1002. Now, the way we do this is, or actually the way CUCM does this, is that by default, whenever a call comes into a gateway, go ahead and open up our gateway web pages here. Whenever a call comes in through a gateway, CUCM looks at the calling party number and it tries to match that against any and all of the remote destinations that it has configured, the destination number in any of the remote destinations. And if it matches, then it essentially replaces the display, and even the CDR, replaces the calling number with the shared desk phone. So by that, let's say we have Hurley's home or Hurley's mobile, either one, remote destination. That's, of course, linked to the shared line of 1002, If we go over to the remote destination profile, which aggregates all the remote destinations, then we actually see the ability to jump into the actual shared line of 1002, and that is associated with the desk phone. And of course, the directory number 1002, the shared line, shows up not only with, well, that as the directory number or extension, but also as the caller ID. Okay, so again, this is if the inbound calling party, and every calling number is evaluated, if it matches against one of these remote destinations. Well, how do the calling numbers come in? Let's go take a look at our gateways. I had erased the buffer before we started this task. So we just had a call come in from, looks like it was Sawyer's Mobile. We see the name right there, and the country code 31 and 6 and the remaining digits. It came into branch 1, 2001, right? So let's take a look, and let's actually open up, not that program, we want to open up TextEdit, or if you're in Windows, Notepad. Other program clears opening. There we go. And let's make the font face a little bigger. There we go. Okay, so this was inbound from the gateway. This happens to be inbound from gateway at branch 1. Or I could just say branch 1 gateway. Okay? So this is the inbound calling number from the branch 1 gateway, and we're going to compare this against the inbound number from against the inbound calling number, against the inbound destination pattern. So let's go take a look at the remote destination. Copy this off, and we'll paste this. Let's paste this at the top. This is Sawyer's Mobile remote destination. Okay, so the remote destination is the one that has to be matched. So we see that the inbound calling number obviously doesn't match exactly. In fact, the only thing missing is the plus, right? Well, let's take a look at the other call. So here, when Hurley's Mobile called into James's phone at branch 2, the inbound calling number was, and you know what, let's do a local call just to contrast this rather than the Sawyer's Mobile calling into branch 1 was an international call for calling party. And I want to contrast that. The other one was international as well, so let's do a different call just so that we can have something other than an international calling type. So let's say Hurley's Mobile into branch 1, 15126022001. No, let's actually say Sawyer's Mobile into branch 2. So 020703. Oops, didn't catch my 0 there. 020703 3001. I don't think I have 3001 up here, do I? All right, let me open that up real quick. One note while I'm opening up 3001 is that calls into calls in from a mobile or a remote destination into the same DID as their shared line tend not to work so well a lot of times. Sometimes they work fine. Sometimes they can meet with issues. At least in 7.0.1 might be a bug, but it's mainly, you know, if you think about it, there's not too many times when you would really need to call your own DID. Okay, if you want to hand a call off, we've already showed how to do that. You just hang up your remote destination, your mobile. If you wanted to call into your voicemail, you'd call in the Unity main line, you know, the main pilot number. So there's really not a lot of times when you'd call your own DID. But anyhow, let's call in now. Redial. And we see it showing up as localized. Then hang up. Localized as 3001 is set to C, national numbers, because it's not the 20 or 020 area code. And you know what? That's probably going to be a bad example as well. Well, it sort of is, because I actually have that one coming in as international for a reason that I'll discuss here in just a moment. All right, let's do. Let's go back to calls just coming in. Actually, I should set content up there. So I do actually have Sawyer's Mobile coming in with the full country code, not a plus, but the full country code for calling number and the type of international. It's not really, and I'll get into why I have that configured this way in just a moment. For right now, just to contrast that, let's go back again and let's dial from, let's say, Hurley's home into the branch 1 site. So 15126022001. Guess that was the one I just started to do and decided not to, but we'll get into all the reasons of why. Okay, so it's coming in localized as a national number, which it is. So here we've got Hurley's home. Calling party number comes in with 10 digits. Type was national. So let's grab the 10 digits, go back. Okay. This was, I believe, Hurley's home. Hurley's home calling number inbound from the branch 1 gateway. And let's take a look at what the actual remote destination is. Copy this. Okay, so there we see that 10 digits of the 12 overall characters, the plus isn't really a digit or DTMF, but it is a character, so 10 digits out of the 12 match. And here we have, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 11 digits out of 12 characters. 11 out of 12 characters match. Here, 10 out of 12 characters match. Okay? But let's take a look at what happens on our gateways. So here we're at the, we'll launch into the branch 1 H323 gateway. Let's say that this was, it's just here that we'll include in the final class files. So Hurley's home remote destination that needs to be matched. And here's Hurley's home calling number inbound. Okay? So on this branch 1 gateway, if we scroll down to the bottom, we remember that incoming calling party settings automatically are configured to automatically globalize all numbers based on their type. So Just add the type here. This type came in as, I believe, national. Let's just verify that. Hurley's home came in as that 10 digits with type national. This, Sawyer's mobile, came into the branch 1 gateway as type international. So for national, we were told to prefix a +1, right? Oops. Back to our text pad. So if we had prefixed a +1, this is what came in from the gateway. We prefix a +1. So the transformed calling number should be this, right? +1, 206. Now, I don't know about you, but if we copy this just above this actual remote destination, to me, those look the same. So then why didn't it match, and why didn't it show up when Hurley's home called in? Why didn't it show up to the branch 1 2001 extension as Hugo Reyes 1002? Well, the reason is that the matching is done before calling party settings ever get applied. Okay, so remote destination matching happens before any globalization. And I'll even say so the below not be taken into account when trying to match So that's not going to help us. So why did I even go into it? Well, I went into it for, thoroughness, for completeness, so that you understand, because there have been many questions that I've had in other classes when I've taught this that say, well, wait a minute, shouldn't the globalization actually match this number properly, and, because it was transformed at the inbound gateway? Well, it would, except that the remote destination match happens before the globalization occurs. So I just wanted to point that out so there's no possible misunderstanding there. Okay, and the same thing would have been true here. Globalization would have prefixed a plus for all international types. However, that's not taken into account. So because of this, we need to find another way to match. Now, let's take a look at what would happen if a call came in a headquarter gateway. And let's just note before we begin, actually let's take a look at the CUCM server real briefly. We have a SIP trunk there. And if you recall, with SIP trunks, globalization is limited on what can happen at the actual gateway page, at least in 7.0.1. In 7.1, we add, or Cisco added a new field over here to the right of the incoming calling party number prefix. And the field was, it was basically a drop down that said, found calling party transformation pattern CSS. And there had this drop down, or does now have this drop down. And you can actually drop it down and choose a calling search space here. And in that calling search space, then you can have it go match a calling party transformation pattern. So essentially, what we have to do in CUCM 7.0.1, the version on the lab, we do not have to do in real life with 7.1 or 8.0 or the others. Because of that calling party transformation CSS, we can use Call Manager to do it. But because in 7.01 we only have the unknown type to match, we really can't distinguish between national, international, and well, actually, it's not just in 7.01 that we have unknown. It's SIP that doesn't carry the calling party type of national, international. It doesn't even carry unknown. It's just that, well, everything is unknown. But there is no calling party types in SIP. There is an H323 because it's predicated on, built upon ISDN, and Skinny is built on H323, as we know. But SIP doesn't have this. So 7.1 fixes, I'm sorry, 7.1 fixes this, but for the lab, what we had to do, because we could not globalize in CUCM, we had to do it at the actual gateway. So in CUCM corporate headquarter gateway, if we do a show run pipe to the section of, actually let's just do in with voice translation. We had this voice translation rule set 1 that matched national and added a +1, matched international, added a plus, matched subscriber, and added a +1. Okay? And we remember back from our module regarding voice translation rules that if nothing is matched, then it is automatically carried through to the essentially the translated number in the spot that it was in, unimpeded. So here we're prefixing +1. We don't have to say either \0 or ampersand, which would both call all of what was here because we didn't match anything. Now if we had matched dot asterisk or dot plus, then we would have to say +1 ampersand to call everything that was original, or +1 \0 would do the exact same thing. Just so that everyone's clear on what's going on here. So we're only matching anything, or really nothing, if the type is subscriber and we're adding +1, international and we're adding plus, national and we're adding +1. Okay? Now we're translating it to the same type. We could translate it to unknown. It really doesn't matter because SIP isn't going to carry this information. The important thing is, since this is only relevant, the type is only relevant between ISDN and us, we've got our PSTN cloud here, and we've got an ISDN PRI, and we've got our gateway, then type is only really locally relevant on this link. Because once it goes beyond here, where's it going to go? Maybe it's going to go to a local, well, in this case, headquarter. So local headquarter phone. But maybe it's going to be forwarded on to a branch 1 phone or a branch 2 phone. Okay, so it would have been, if let's say the call came in as subscriber on the ISDN PRI, it would be subscriber here to this local phone, but then it would be national when it went to the branch 1 phone and international when it was forwarded onto the branch 2 phone. So subscriber, unless CUCM is not only carrying this information but also actually modifying it as it goes per hop, and we don't have, at least not before 7.1 when we have geolocation, we don't have any way to tag each phone and say where it physically is, and so how subscribers should be changed to national or international or anything like that. So because of that, save this real quickly here. Okay, so since it's only really locally relevant, and since CUCM doesn't change that as we go, then the truth is that this information, once we globalize the actual DNIS, or sorry, calling number rather, the ANI, once we globalize the number, the type becomes irrelevant at that point. Okay, because call manager isn't going to continue to carry it or modify it. So because of that, we really don't care about the type once we globalize the number, but we've globalized the number here on the gateway, and so here we're voice translation profile called globalize. We're translating the calling or ANI for rule set 1, the one we just looked at here, and then if we take a look down to our voice port is where we're actually calling that translation profile on an incoming basis to globalize all numbers. So why did I just get done telling you that? Because since the globalization of the number, or since the transformation of the number has been done on the iOS gateway prior to CUCM knowing anything about it, then the way CUCM actually sees this call from the headquarter site is, let's say Hurley's home comes in, separation here, Hurley's inbound number coming in from the headquarter gateway with type national actually gets globalized on the headquarter iOS gateway. Now let's say the router then is forwarded to CCM, and so the way that CUCM sees this calling number come in is globalized. So if we take a look back at our iOS, I just cleared it off. National is globalized with a +1. Okay, so CUCM sees the number come in as this, and we can copy because we already know what Hurley's home remote destination is supposed to look like. And so when CUCM sees the number coming in, it's already in this format. Okay, so to contrast that, we said that, let me just actually maximize this a little more so we can see everything. To contrast that, remember that we said that essentially call manager, CUCM is doing the matching before any globalization at the, and I should note that this is the CUCM gateway webpage, happens. But because this number is globalized in the actual router, CUCM sees the call coming in as +1, which is why if we look back at the actual SIP trunk for corporate headquarters, the incoming calling party for unknown, basically all calls, is set to default, which is do nothing. Okay, so it's already globalized in the gateway. When it comes in, it identically matches Hurley's home remote destination. So let's sum all this up with an example. Let's have Hurley's home, and this is the reason we hadn't called into corporate headquarter gateway at all yet. So let's have Hurley's home call in to 206-501-1001. We haven't done anything yet, but if this ever refreshes, ringing, but hopefully this client refreshes here. In this call, let's tell this to start over. This is 3001. I'm looking at the wrong one. That would be Y. All right, well, let's just tell it to be 1001. Okay, so let's have Hurley's home call in again. When it comes in the corporate headquarter gateway to 1001, a full match is done based on everything we just discussed, and it already shows coming in from Hugo Reyes 1002 because it matches a complete remote destination. Same thing with Hurley's mobile. Call cleared, but now it should be ringing again, so let this refresh. Great. And the same thing should be true of Sawyer's mobile. There we go. So it matches a complete remote destination for all three, and all three automatically show up proper. So one way we could do this is globalize in the iOS gateways, but headquarter that's already done, branch 1 that would work, it's H323. Branch 2 is currently an MGCP gateway. So it presents a little bit of a unique challenge. Well, not really so much. Let's now go to actual configuration, now that we've done all the demos and talked about the concept. Let's go to System Service Parameters, and this is the only thing that we need to do to make this matching work. We'll choose either server because it's an enterprise parameter and the call manager service. Once this finishes loading, we're going to scroll all the way to the bottom of the page quickly, and we'll go slightly up, and we see cluster-wide parameters, system mobility, and we see a lot of parameters that we're about to talk about in our next few tasks. But first of all, without even doing anything, enable mobile voice access, we don't need to do that. There is the field called Match Caller ID with Remote Destination. And if we actually take a look at the context-sensitive help for this, we see that the parameter specifies the criteria for matching the incoming calling number. You can either specify complete match, must match exactly, and that happened at the corporate headquarter because we had done it in the iOS router before it got to CUCM again. Or we can do a partial match. A specific number of the digits of the incoming caller ID must match a portion of the remote destination configured. It does tell us briefly here that the incoming caller ID must be equal in length or shorter than the remote destination. And it goes on to give us a little bit of an example. But let's take a look at the next field because it gives us a little more information that we're going to find very interesting with the number of digits matching, and specifically what we just said with partial match, and that the caller ID, the inbound calling number, has to be equal or shorter than length. So let's look here. Number of digits to match, which by default is 10 if we set this previous field to partial match. And it tells us this parameter is applicable only when matching is set to partial match above. The number of digits to consider starts with the final digit and counts forward. For example, a value of 8 means that the mobility feature will attempt to match the last 8 digits of an incoming caller ID. Also, and this is the important bit, to successfully complete a match, the incoming calling ID number must be equal in length or shorter than the configured remote destination number. Well, we just read that above, but it gives us a good example. For example, if the caller ID of the incoming call is, so this is the actual calling number coming in on the gateway, 408-555-1234, which happens to be 10 digits, and the matching caller ID is set to partial match, and the number of digits to consider for partial match is set to 7, then CUCM will try to find a match against a list of remote destinations. So in this example, a remote destination of 91408, let's just put this on our text pad actually here. 91408, we got the actual inbound gateway calling number and the configured remote destination. Always done this one above, so let's just do that to... Yep. In this case, let's go back. So in this case, an example of 9140855512344, 11 digits in length, will be considered a match in the case where the remote destination, will be considered a match, okay, because the actual inbound calling number is equal to or less than the actual number of digits in length and match to the configured remote destination, okay? However, if a remote destination was actually set up as this number, so let's just copy this number, bring this down here, try to match these. Actually, you know what? Let's do this as this is going to equal a match. If partial match service parameters are set, I want you to be able to remember this because this is important, set to partial match and 7 digits, then this would equal a match. However, if we had the situation where the configured remote destination was 955512344, so let's say this is before the idea of globalization. I already said we should use plus numbers, but before the idea of globalization, and so why am I bringing it up? Because it's going to be actually very relevant in another example that I'm going to show you. It has to do with why I configured the PSTN to send Sawyer's Mobile in as an international number. But before globalization, we would have configured the remote destination with maybe 9 or 0 or 9-1 or whatever it took before the actual number to get the call to route out the gateway. Well, if our CUCM server was set up, let's say in the US, to send 7 digits out for a local number, then this would have gone out, and we might have set up the remote destination as 9 and then 7 digits. The problem is, if the actual inbound calling number is longer, even though we're only told to have 7 digits match, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and they do, call manager is telling us in the service parameter notes that this will not be considered a match because the actual number is longer in length than the configured remote destination, even if we're telling it to only match a subset of the digits. Okay, so that's really interesting, but what other implications are there with this? Well, let's give another example using what we had earlier. Let's actually bring this one down. Okay, so Sawyer's mobile number here to what we're doing. If the actual configured remote destination that needs to be matched is if the actual configured remote destination that needs to be matched is +316703575575, but let's say that this was not coming in to the gateway, the MGCP gateway, branch 2, as 31 and international, which it wouldn't be. It would come in as national and 067. Why? Because it's in the same country, right? So if it's coming in the same country as the gateway where it's coming in, well, then it's not going to be, okay, so it's, I should say if it's actually coming from a remote phone that is local, at least in the same country as the gateway that it's coming in, then it's definitely not going to come in international. It could either come in subscriber or national. And in this case, because the area code is not 20, it's 06 for mobile numbers, it's going to come in as national. So forget about the globalization bit. The important thing is this is what's coming in as the calling number from the PSTN into the iOS gateway, and because we're MGCP and backhauling Q931, this is what CUCM is seeing, 06. So even if we told partial match to be in effect and to match 9 digits, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, it is that this remote destination is longer in length, which is what the CUCM service parameter nodes seem to be saying, that it had to be longer in length, that it couldn't be shorter in length than the configured remote destination. But in reality, it's not only longer in length, but at least all of the digits that do come in have to match, even if we're only telling it to match a subset of those digits. So we're only telling it to match 9 of the 10 that come in, and 9 do match, right? But this 0 does not match the next digit, even though we didn't tell it to match that. I realize that. But even though we didn't, we told it to match partial match in 9 digits. I can tell you this will not be a match, and it's the reason I set my PSTN to bring in 3167 and mark it as national, so that the globalization just adds a plus, rather than the default, which I had previously set it before testing, as 067. Okay? So the only way that we would be able to deal with this in real life, and this is going to be certainly a big issue, many of you are realizing that are not in the United States watching this, many of the carriers, or I would say maybe most of the carriers in Europe, are going to send calls in, even local calls, even subscriber calls, with, let's say, Amsterdam or London, same thing, 020, or this mobile, 06, okay? They're going to send a preceding 0. This is not part of the E164 number. It's sent in as a convenience. It's a trunk or national trunk code. But the only way that you would be able to deal with this is to convert the gateway from MGCP. It could not be MGCP. It would have to be a ISDN coming into a SIP or an H323 gateway, and you must at that point do globalization on the actual gateway before it hits CUCM, just like we have it done on our SIP gateway for corporate headquarters. So the reason I set it to bring in 3.1 and mark it as international is because I didn't want to have to go through in this lesson reconfiguring the whole gateway from MGCP to H323. It wouldn't have been the end of the world, but we've already done this and accomplished this and demonstrated how it works on the corporate headquarter gateway. So I just wanted to point out the anomaly that does occur based on this being an MGCP gateway. Okay, so something important to keep in mind. I'm going to include this file in the final class files, but it's the reason I have it coming in as a international call with country code. So What we do still see happening, though, going back to my text file, is that, as we mentioned, branch 1, the call's coming in as 10 digits, and the remote destination adds +1, okay, or matches 12 characters. So we need to match at least a minimum of 10 digits. Okay, so we're going to set it to partial match and 10 digits. This tells us that if you're choosing partial match, be sure to enter the number of calling digits, which there's a default of 10. And we'll just leave it at 10. That will work just fine. We'll click Save. Now occasionally, you know how I've shown that if you're working on another page and you happen to open multiple pages with tabs, which I should mention, by the way, you won't have access to right-click at all in the lab, so you won't be able to open in multiple tabs there. So you won't run into this issue. Plus, it's Internet Explorer, so you won't run into it either. But because I'm on a Mac and I'm using Firefox, occasionally I run into that issue. When I do run into the issue, you always see that the status update successful is kind of gone, and whatever else is sandwiched up against the save and set to default buttons up at the top. Well, on service parameters, this doesn't actually occur, so I'm only saying this for those that are either on a Mac or maybe using Firefox on a Windows to configure CUCM. By the way, don't ever use Safari. It will half the time not work and the other time totally botch the database. Nothing that can't be repaired, but anyhow, if you're using Firefox, it might still say update successful on the service parameters, but occasionally I've found that it didn't actually update it. So for instance, even though the values that you put in there do stay, sometimes you need to come back in and change them back to something else, and then save, and then come back and change them to something else. But close your browser and reopen it if that should happen. So if for whatever reason, while we're doing the demonstration here next, it doesn't show up properly, well, then that's what I'm about to do, is come back in. Hard way. So now we've set it to partial match in 10 digits, and assuming the save worked properly, let's call in from, let's say, Hurley's Mobile into the branch 1 gateway. Now says, once this updates, from Hugo Reyes 1002. Same thing if Ford calls in, James Ford or Sawyer. Also, notice what's happening over here. James Ford phone went from the idle, the little telephone idle icon, over to 2 telephones, and if we actually had the physical phone, we'd see that the red light is on. So if I answer this call, mute so we can avoid feedback, we see that James looks like he's on a call, and if you had the actual physical phone in front of you, you'd see the red light on this translucent BLF, and we see who he's talking to. Now again, this is because privacy has not been enabled, but even if it is enabled and we don't see who he's talking to, we see that he's on the phone. But wait a minute, he's not on the phone. But he is, because it's a shared line. So it retains all of the same characteristics as a shared line, except for the one where if he hangs up, then all of a sudden the call is normally gone. But in this case, we heard music on hold, and I had to resume rather quickly. So now James is talking directly to Eloise because he was on his mobile. He had called in to Eloise at 2001. He was then walking into the office where he had his desk phone. So he just went ahead, and just as if the call had been extended to him, even though he actually made the call into Eloise to 2001, rather than 2001 dialing 3002 and single number reach taking over, in the same way, his call was routed in the enterprise calling number, enterprise directory as 3002. It shows up as 3002 so that if Eloise wants to call him back, she calls back his desk phone. Maybe he's not available. She gets his desk voicemail versus getting his cell phone or mobile phone number showing up and then calling that back to return the call and getting his mobile phone voicemail. So we've got still single voicemail box for enterprise. Also, he has the ability to hang up. Music on hold is extended from the shared line remote destination profile settings. Device pool, MRGL, finding an MRG, finding a media resource of a music on hold server, having proper network or user hold source file played, which might possibly be different than his actual desk phone. And then the ability to hang up and resume the call for 10 seconds by default. We could change this at his desk phone. And again, he's still got mobility, so he can press the mobility soft key. I don't think I pressed it there. There we go. Let it update. Say send call to mobile. Again, any time of the day, doesn't matter if it's within his ring schedule or not. He can answer the call. Put it on mute so no feedback. And we see that it actually came from James Ford because he really forwarded it back out or rerouted it. And if he ends the call here, he's still on the call here. Eloise is hearing the music on hold. Oops. Oh boy. Problem there was I kept hitting the up button on the remote control client to raise the volume so you could hear the music on hold playing to Eloise, but of course the call dropped after 10 seconds and the VoIP integration tool hadn't finished sending all the up arrows, so it was then turning the ringer up. But anyhow, all of that works properly. So let's see, Hurley's home, calling into 011-3120, 703-3000, let's say 2. Calling James Ford phone. From Hugo Reyes. Okay, so whether it's coming in the MGCP gateway, you can verify that it's coming in the MGCP gateway right here. Actually, let's just clear off all these buffers. Stop this call. Clear off all of our buffers. Show that the call's coming in the proper gateway. So we'll have Sawyer call in. You should probably dial international, but so we see the calls coming in. Of course, we already know that corporate headquarters is doing things on its local gateway, so we're still doing a partial match because we told CUCM to do so, but a complete match would work as well. Okay, so we'll clear off this. We'll take a look at a call coming in a branch 1 gateway. Let's say Hurley's mobile calling in Eloise phone. That shows up proper. The call didn't come in corporate headquarters or branch 2, it came in branch 1. We're doing a partial match. That worked properly. That off, so all 3 are empty buffers, and then we'll try, let's say, Hurley's mobile coming in to, and yes, he would dial international, but I'm just being lazy and dialing the number quickly. Oh, and I don't have 3001 in front of me. Yes, I do. There we go. So comes in as Hugo Reyes. Not coming in headquarters or branch 1. It's coming in branch 2. We're doing a partial match, and all we care about is actually 10 digits of the 12, although we have 11, and it's shorter than the 12 that are configured, including the plus. So again, other than a call coming in a European gateway with a preceding 0, which we said we could solve by doing the globalization on the actual gateway iOS, so it could not be MGCP, all calls are rooted in enterprise call detail records and show up as the actual shared line DN. Turning the call very easy, and it gives us a completed solution.